Silo Season 3, Episode 2 is entitled It's All Good, but by the end of this episode, it's pretty clear that nothing is all good. So let's get ready for some Silo hibachi, some coffee with no fawning, and a heavy dose of vitamin D+. Welcome to Real Enigmas and Theories. Tap that like and hype on your way in, and let's get right to the cook-up. In my last video, I said that the Iran conflict might be the visible surface story while something deeper is going on underneath. And episode 2 pretty much walks us right into the receipts when Helen questions whether the dirty bomb at the Capitol was even real. And that's heavy because if the dirty bomb isn't real, then the public crisis is already contained. And that means that the whole retaliation story could be a fake display like one would see in the helmet if they were going out to clean. But this ain't no helmet display. This is a political display. The silo has a screen that tells people what to fear, and the before times may have had the dirty bomb story doing the same thing. So what you see here is them putting the image in front of the public so that they can react out of fear. Then the leadership moves and gets the war started because the dirty bomb story makes the people want their government to protect them. The military missions get approved, the committees get created, and now the bunkers and silos start making sense. So questioning the dirty bomb is doing exactly what Juliet and many before her were doing in the silo when they were questioning the display on the screen. Now we know Helen had the Pez, so that most likely means that she ended up in the silo. And this inquisitive nature that Helen has is totally inherited. Juliet has Helen's inquisitive traits, Daniel's mechanical engineering traits, and Charlotte's bravery. George gave Juliet the Pez, and now Robert and Camille's son Anthony has it. And Robert even tells him that the relic is tied to protection and bravery. And little did Robert know, 300 plus years before that, that Pez was in the hands of someone who was very brave and trying to get to the bottom of a story that was shocking the entire world. And Charlotte was already on the trail before her squadron crashed. She went to Helen because she wanted the truth about the Iran conflict. Then she sent Helen to David to see if he could get on that Iran conflict committee to gain more intel. So you had Charlotte, Helen, and Daniel. The military access, the media access, and the political access. And that's why Charlotte had to be watched. And like I said in the first video, when we first met Charlotte, she was moving all cloak and dagger like somebody was following her. And she was right because the man on that train showed up at the Stinson clinic where they eventually brought her. So Charlotte pretty much knew that she was under surveillance and there was somebody after her. And now it looks like the people that were after her have her. Pretty much the before times version of what happened to Juliet later. Charlotte is watched before her memory is damaged, and Juliet is watched after her memory is damaged. Same control system and probably the same memory drug as well. I mean, it could have seemed like the silo had developed this memory control method over the last 300 years, but episode 2 said nope. This was already tested before the world went underground. Now, this Dr. Victor Serkovich is running experiments on Charlotte and has a history of sketchy human experiments in poor countries that are in debt with the United States. And that tells us that the memory work techniques were not born in the silo and they are part of the old world. It was tested and perfected on the people and then brought into the system that eventually becomes the silo. Now, Serkovich says that memory is internal biology and that memory is not only in the brain, but it's actually stored in the body as well. So that means that Charlotte's memories are not gone. They're just being blocked. And that's most likely the same for Juliet. Now, the doctor explains that the jogging of the memories can make them come back, but he also explains that they can pick and choose what comes back, which would actually be memory editing. And that explains the scene that had me puzzled in episode 1. When Juliet encounters Robert in the hallway and he tells her that he hopes she regains her memories. But we all know that that didn't make any sense. If Juliet gets her memories back, she remembers that Bernard and Robert lying about her going out to clean. and also Silo 17 with Solo Jimmy and what happened in the airlock. So Robert doesn't really want her memories to come back. He's using the memory control methods by planting certain memories to create the narrative. He straight up told her that she held his wife and son hostage at gunpoint. And when Juliet asks Robert who he is, he says he's the judge of the silo. And that's the slick part when you really think about it, because when she held his family hostage, he wasn't the judge yet. And he's using her damaged memory to plant a cleaner version of himself. I mean, you got to think of it. She doesn't know who these people are right now. She doesn't have any of her memories. So she probably just thinks that he's some random authority figure. And notice how Robert wasn't in the second episode at all. I mean, he didn't show up at all. However, the talk and the explanation about how the memory drug works is shown between Dr. Serkovich and Daniel. And Daniel even asked the doctor if he could implant a lie into Charlotte's mind, and the doctor says yes. So that's precisely what you see Robert doing in the first episode when he tells her that she held the family hostage and that he was the judge. He didn't explain much of it. He just added certain parts into it. Because apparently this is how that drug works. You don't have to erase the whole person. You can let them remember things in pieces and guide them toward the wrong conclusion. And we see the same thing happening in the storage closet with Patrick Kennedy and Sandy. They think she's lying about what's on the outside, but the writers use this scene to show us Kennedy remembering how Robert offered him the same drug, which proves that Robert knows the mechanics of the drug and how it works. And they've realized that this is what is happening to Juliet as well. And Juliet tries to hide her not taking the drug later, but her nurse is on point and peep game without a hitch. The question is, will she snitch? Let me know in the comments what you think she'll do. Now let's take a look at the scene with Daniel and Charlotte, because it's one of the most esoteric segments of this episode. Really dope stuff packed into this one scene. Okay, so Daniel tries to jog her memory with some childhood stories real quick. He talks about Cartersville, Georgia, where they grew up, and he talks about their two mean bulldogs. He tells her that he became the Georgia Bulldogs mascot, and she laughed so hard that she peed herself. He also tells her that their parents are named Grace and William. And I'm going to tell you right now, none of the dialogue in that scene that I just went over were some random throwaway lines. These were heavy subliminal bars. Check this out. When Daniel says that he and Charlotte grew up in Cartersville, that hit different because that's right up the road from me here in Georgia. But Cartersville is not just a simple Georgia location. That area is tied to the Etowah Mounds, which is one of the most intact Mississippian culture sites in the Southeast. And that's heavy because Silo is a show about buried civilization, lost memory, and ancestral system. And Cartersville, Georgia is a location with buried civilization, lost memory, and ancestral systems. Also, Charlotte's memory is buried, and Cartersville is a place of buried civilization. And Daniel is digging through the personal memory in the same way that the show keeps digging through the historical memory. And this is why the flipping back and forth between 300 years in the silo and 300 years before in the before times is so intriguing. Let's keep going though. He starts talking about they had two mean bulldogs. Now, dogs are tied to loyalty, protection, and guarding thresholds. And in a lot of myth systems, dogs sit near the boundaries between two worlds. And by Daniel talking to his sister, he's literally trying to bring her across a boundary, or Dr. Serkovich's proverbial drawbridge. Then Daniel saying that he became the Georgia Bulldogs mascot is real heavy, because it demonstrates him taking on that guarding threshold archetype. And a mascot is not really about somebody dancing in a costume. The original meaning is tied to a magic charm, sorcery, protection, and something that carries an unseen influence for an entire group. So Daniel saying that he became the Georgia Bulldog mascot literally means that he became the symbol of protection for Georgia. And that hits different when you remember that he becomes a congressman, the person that's meant to represent the people, protect the people. And he also invents the drill that may help build the silo. And if Daniel and Helen are tied to Juliet's bloodline, then Juliet may have inherited that same role. Just like he became the mascot for the Georgia Bulldogs, she becomes the symbol that the people rally behind in Silo 18. They even name themselves after her and get the same tattoos like her, just like how fans dress up as the mascot. Now, let's move right along into the name of the parents. He said that the names of the parents were Grace and William. Now, Grace means mercy, favor, protection, and forgiveness. And William, or Will, means choice, desire, and personal agency. And that's crazy because the whole silo is built on taking people's will away and calling it grace. And I almost glanced right over this, but it's one of the most esoteric angles with the sitcom Will and Grace. Now, in this sitcom, Will is a lawyer and Grace is an interior designer, which equals law and design. And law and design is exactly what the silo is also built on. You have the law side with the Pact, judicial, you got the sheriffs, the relics, cleaning sentences, the mining restrictions, and forbidden speech. And the design side is the 144 levels, the stairs, the class separation, the cafeteria display, the cameras. I mean, check out the design of the vault and how everything in IT looks different from the rest of the silo. Look at the designs of the domiciles that everybody lives in and how they vary from the bottom to the top. Even the design of the clothing. And while we're talking about clothing, look at the robe that Juliet's been wearing for the last 2 episodes. That's right. It looks like it's made of wool. And wool is the title of the first book. And Juliet having the wool being pulled over her eyes and the people having to use the wool to clean as well. It's crazy because Juliet is literally wrapped in the title symbol while people are pulling the wool over her eyes. So that robe is not filler bars. Now, the sitcom Will and Grace separates law and design into 2 characters. And the show Silo fuses law and design into one control system, and Daniel and Charlotte come from parents named William and Grace. And don't get it twisted. I'm not saying that the show is doing a sitcom crossover. I'm saying that those words and that title opens up a heavy symbolic doorway. Even though Charlotte wasn't really receptive to what she was telling him, we see that same pattern with Juliet when she's kind of callous or desensitized to the whole father dying thing. She doesn't even know him or anything. When I was watching the scene with Daniel and Charlotte and she was laying in the bed, I felt like I was listening to what Daniel was saying more than she was. And then Charlotte mistakenly calls Daniel Donald, which leads right back to the Will and Grace thread again. In the 2016 Will and Grace special, Vote Honey, Will and Grace are frustrated over Donald Trump's candidacy. And with Karen Walker carrying a pro-Trump energy into their apartment. Now, you also have Martha Walker. Now, Karen Walker was a character on the Will and Grace show, but we also have Martha Walker, and she actually shows up in this episode, and it's tied to Juliet, her memory, and them sitting down having some coffee together. And the Donald is also heavy in our current news cycle with the conflict in Iran, just like the show's conflict with Iran. Then you have the conversation with Helen and Daniel when she tells about how Charlotte had a mission connected to bunker busters. And in early 2026, the U.S. Air Force has been buying massive bunker busters to strike Iran since the strike that they did in 2025. So bunker busters and Iranian underground facilities have been all over the real life news cycle, and now they show up in this show days after Donald strikes Iran. So the timing is super crazy. Iran and bunker buster meta is crazy in 2026. I don't know what to say. And just when you think the Will and Grace symbolism doesn't stick hard enough, Silo Season 3, Episode 2 is entitled It's All Good. And in the episode of Will and Grace called Crazy in Love, Will remembers a guy at a party who kept saying it's all good. And Grace acts like she wasn't into him and he annoyed her, but then later Jack exposed the fact that Grace was actually kissing that dude all night. So Grace was literally trying to change the narrative. And that's why the title works, It's All Good, because it's really a lie that nothing is all good. And the good narrative is flipped. Camille and the Vault voice even talk about Juliet absorbing the narrative. And it's crazy that in that show, Grace was trying to flip the narrative. And I'm not going to lie, I'm an audio engineer, so I have a pretty fine-tuned ear. Speaking of that Vault voice, it sounds like a combination of several voices, and to me, one of the most distinctive ones that I've seen so far is the voice of Daniel. It literally sounds like his voice is one of the voices that's piled into the voices that make up the AI algorithm voice.
After her return, Juliet's survival was unwelcome.
Right now, call up total strangers and beg them for money.
I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. That's just what it sounds like to me. And one of the craziest shots in this episode was that final shot with the porters moving the barrels marked vitamin D. That was crazy because in my last video, I said that Salvador Quinn drugging the water might not have been his own idea and that he might have been following orders from the Vault voice. Now, episode 2 shows Camille working with the voice and they're about to drug the people through the water again. So I guess vitamin D plus stands for vitamin don't remember a damn thing. You got these porters just following orders without no question. And if that doesn't work, the safeguard pipe is hidden underground to kill the whole silo in sections. And that's one of the things that Juliet needs to remember, that she can cap off that whole safeguard pipe. I'm not even going front. I can't help but to wonder what Jimmy/Silo is over there in Silo 17 doing with the other people. I mean, since we're going back 300 years to the before times, we can at least get a couple shots over there to see what's going on over there. You know what I'm saying? That would be dope too. Now, something that jumped right out to me is Camille doing the same breathing work with Juliet that Serkovich was doing with Charlotte. In episode 1, it just kind of looked like Camille was helping Juliet calm down, but episode 2 gives that technique a whole history. Now we know for sure that those breathing exercises are connected to the memory experiment. And Robert also shows that he has knowledge of the mind control techniques when he slick tried to plant that memory in Juliet's head. He also told Patrick Kennedy how far they could go back and how they could take out certain parts of his life. And he said that before the AI chose his wife. So this might be something that's not exclusive to IT, or he could have learned this just working up under Bernard. Now, I thought this was dope writing and editing, how they show Camille mirroring Salvador Quinn, who we've only heard of and not seen, but now they're showing us her mirroring Victor Serkovich in the same episode. Episode 1 shows us that Juliet's memory was being controlled, and episode 2 shows us where that whole memory control system comes from. I thought that they were going to use this whole memory loss trope to try to delay giving us answers and try to stretch the season out a little bit, but they're really using it in a clever way when they're showing that this is a technique that was actually used back in the before times. And the show does talk about the memory loss drug before this season was even thought of. They were talking about the memory loss drug with Patrick Kennedy, and Robert was telling him, we could go back and take all of this memory and blah, blah. So it's not really a cop-out to use it. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I do like how they're maneuvering with it, and they're not using it to stretch any answers. I mean, we are getting the answer. I mean, Charlotte wasn't some falling vet that Dr. Serkovich was trying to help. She was already suspicious of the Iran story. She went to Helen. She went to David. And that means that Charlotte helped start the investigation before she ever lost her memory. So we see in the before times what's happening to her was threatened to Patrick Kennedy by Robert. And I shouldn't even say threatened, it was kind of offered to him. And now we're getting a heavy confirmation that she was indeed being followed. The man from the train shows up at the clinic. So she wasn't just paranoid. Somebody had eyes on her before the experiments ever started. And Sirkovich, with his sketchy history of running human experiments, he starts breaking down how the memory control works. He says that objects can bring memories back. And I think that's where the watch that Dr. Pete gave Hank comes in. I wasn't too happy with Hank last episode when he didn't even mention the watch, but I think it's going to come up later, and I think it's going to be very important because now we know that items can actually jog memories and help them snap back into place. So you got Sirkovich using that breathing technique to calm down Charlotte. Camille uses it with Juliet. The voice in the vault is giving the instructions, and the objects and notes are triggering pieces of Juliet's memory. We see the same thing happening in the before times, and it's operating the same way in the silo. So what that tells me is that the clinic is actually the ancestor of the vault. Just like that nanotech black goo that we saw in episode 1 could be the ancestor of the AI in the vault. Just like Daniel, Charlotte, and Helen could be the ancestors of Juliet and a lot of people that have come along in the silo. Now, the Will and Grace thread is hitting hard like a metal baton to the wrist. Daniel and Charlotte come from Will and Grace, which means choice and personal agency, grace meaning mercy and protection and forgiveness. And like I said before, that's basically the whole fight inside of the silo. And then you got the sitcom angle with Will being a lawyer, Grace being the interior designer. There's your law and design. The Pact, judicial and forbidden speech, all the 44 levels, all those stairs, all that's the design part. And if Will and Grace are Daniel and Charlotte's parents and Juliet is their descendant, then Will and Grace become the ancestral connection while the silo fuses law and design to become one control system. I mean, we're starting to get that chosen people vibe. I mean, Charlotte was being targeted before she would, her memories were taken away. So it's like she was chosen. Then you got Charlotte calling Daniel Donald, and now we get the Will and Grace doorway that opens up all this meta stuff. Donald is already tied to the Will and Grace through that whole Trump era special. The show's giving heavy clues while Trump is sitting heavy in the real world news cycle. Silos talking about conflicts with Iran, dirty bombs, retaliation, bunker busters, and underground targets. And just a couple days ago, in our real world, bunker busters in Iran and underground facilities have been blowing up like crazy. And like I said, these are all chosen people vibes because now Daniel's just not only Daniel. Daniel means God is my judge. That's what the name Daniel means. And Daniel inside the Bible, his whole story is set in the aftermath of war. Babylon defeats Judah, destroys Jerusalem, and then it takes Daniel and put him in exile. Then in Daniel, I believe Daniel 10, Daniel fasts and prays for understanding, and then the angel arrives and says that he was delayed because of the prince of the kingdom of Persia resisted him for 21 days. So that Daniel-Iran connection is even in the Bible. And if you know me, I don't just look at these connections as arbitrary because we find them all across Hollywood, in the media, even in the music industry. These connections show up in rap lyrics, song lyrics, country lyrics. It's all the symbolism is definitely tied within today's entertainment. And not just today's entertainment, it's always been tied into entertainment. I mean, anyway, you have the It's All Good connection with the Will and Grace and how it's about changing the narrative. You got that Cartersville buried symbolism. You got the Bulldogs mascot and congressman protection symbolism. This episode was totally stacked with a bunch of esoteric notes. Now, one thing from the last episode, I think I kind of got this wrong. I thought that the outsiders were taking the helmet and that would be them hacking into it or something, or being able to show Juliet something later with the helmet. And I was wrong about that. And I have to keep in mind that the outsiders don't know that the helmets even have a screen in them. However, that scene did lead us right back to what the doctor was saying about objects restoring memories, because that Silo 17 helmet let Juliet know that there was something that needed to be done. She started getting some serious flashbacks. And shout out to my man, Lucas Kyle. Both sides are looking for this dude, and I wonder where he is. Last time, we seen him above the explosion, so I'm wondering if he made his way to the down deep, or is he hiding up top somewhere? I mean, they did show us Juliet looking at the stars, and we do know that that was his thing, so I'm hoping to see him soon. Also, shout out to my man, Jerry. Juliet did him dirty in the alleyway, but then after all of that, he turns around and says that if she needs some time to herself, he can make that happen. I mean, bro, that's all she asked for in the first place. Yeah, but episode 2 was just what we needed. Let me know what you think about this episode. Let me know what you think about my coverage of this episode. Do you think that that guy that we saw at the clinic is the guy that was on the train? And where do you think they're going to find Lucas at? Another one is, do you think that Helen, Daniel, and Charlotte are the ancient ancestors of Juliet? And if you like this video, go ahead and do all that dope YouTube stuff. Send this video to somebody that watches the show. And if you're not subbed yet, hopefully this video will be the one that makes you do it. That's all for my video this evening. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.